I could have wielded a lot more power. I think I probably could still easily be leader of my party if I wanted to. I mean, I'm de facto the founder of my party. And I could have turned the party into essentially a personal political vehicle if I'd wanted.
Well, former Prime Minister Stephen Harper certainly made a splashy return to the public eye in recent days. He's commented on everything from the Iran nuclear deal. He supports Donald Trump pulling out of that. The government does it. And then he said that he could easily still be the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. Does this help or hurt the current leader, Andrew Scheer, to talk about that and Justin Trudeau's controversial position on the violence in the Middle East? The Scrum is back. Laura Stone is here, Joyce Napier is here, Craig Oliver is here, and our special guest today is the former Foreign Affairs Minister, and I should say factually, the co-founder of the modern Conservative Party of Canada, Peter MacKay. Good to have you here, sir.
It's a pleasure.
Frankly, a lot of people were surprised that Mr. Harper described himself as a de facto founder. I should point out you were in the room, certainly, as the co-founder. Do his comments about his leadership hurt Andrew Scheer?
I don't think they hurt Andrew Scheer. I think the fact that Stephen Harper, who's clearly very interested and active in foreign affairs and has been for a long time, is stepping out a bit in terms of putting his positions forward. Seeing Prime Minister Harper, former Prime Minister Harper, speaking intelligently and being out there in public, defending positions, I don't see a problem with that for Andrew Scheer.
I think there's something even more than that here. I think that Harper is feeling that if Trudeau is trying to be the sort of leader of the progressive forces in the world, Harper wants to see himself out there defending progressive policies, populist policies, democratic populist policies. And almost in reference to Trudeau, he said liberalism and bad economic policy leads to dispossessed people, and they move to populism.
But is the danger here, Craig, that he's overshadowing Andrew Scheer, who you could argue hasn't put a stamp on the party himself at this point? So to have Stephen Harper come out and say he could still easily be leader if he wanted to, and he says, the second part of that statement is that he chose not to because he wanted to put the party's fortunes before his own. Well, but for him to say that, we already have the Liberals using this as ammunition to attack the Conservative Party. So having Stephen Harper comment on these international issues and even domestic affairs, is he doing that overshadowing who Andrew Scheer has yet to become as a leader?
Whether the Liberals like it or not, populism of Harper's brand is on the move all over the place.
Yeah, I think he can comment. I think that's fair game. He's done that. It was different to say I could still easily be the leader, Joyce.
Why he decides to jump back into the game in the United States is what makes me wonder. What kind of game is he playing? Jump into the game in Canada. But he signs an article in the New York Times in the United States. He speaks at Stanford in California. But when he's here, he's, hiding at McDonald's.
That might interfere with our domestic politics, and I think he's trying to ignore that. He's trying to avoid that.
I think you may be reading too much into this. He goes where he's invited. He's certainly respected in the United States and in other countries, and he gets these invitations. As far as coming back to politics, I would be extremely surprised. I know he has a good relationship with Andrew Scheer, and they speak. I speak to him from time to time, and he's very interested and engaged. And he wants as well, as most leaders do, retired leaders, to protect some of his legacy. And so speaking out about issues that he genuinely cares about, including setting the record straight from time to time. And it wasn't just conservatism or liberalism. I mean, let's not forget that he led the initiative on maternal health when we last hosted the G8 here in Canada. And so there's a natural human instinct to defend positions that you felt strongly about and continue to feel strongly about.
Let me move on to Jason Kenney. In the Calgary Sun column, Jason Kenney attacked Justin Trudeau in a very personal way. They were talking about the pipeline issue, and he said, I know Justin, he doesn't have a clue what he's doing. This guy's an empty trust fund millionaire who has the political depth of a finger bowl. I didn't know you measured that by finger bowl, but apparently. He said he can't read a briefing note longer than a cocktail napkin, and then he doubled down. Justin Trudeau didn't comment back, although he's had personal attacks in the past as well. Peter MacKay, you work with Jason Kenney. I don't get this. Why the personal attack?
It was a bit surprising, but look, Jason is an emotional guy. Jason tends to sometimes respond, and he's very articulate, although this doesn't sound particularly articulate in the way he's phrased it. But there is, I suspect, some degree of anger and frustration. He's trying to distinguish himself, obviously, in provincial politics in Alberta. He's going to be going up against Rachel Notley in a coming provincial election. This is a very hot button issue, to be sure, in the province of Alberta. And I think he is giving voice to the way a lot of people are feeling, quite frankly, in that province about how they're being treated by Ottawa.
It's cheap politics, though. You've got to admit that's kind of below the belt, and very personal and very bitter. And, you know, good for him if he's emotional. And yes, he is an articulate person. He's a very smart fellow. And I think he knew what he was doing, and he was talking to his base. And, you know, he went low.
I was particularly surprised because Trudeau is putting his political life on the line to get the pipeline that Jason wants. So in one sense, they're on the same team, although they certainly are far apart in all other ways.
Laura.
Yeah, I think the general consensus here is that Jason Kenney is better than that. He doesn't need to stoop to that level. And he's talked about civility in politics, so he's kind of going against his word there. But I think, as Mr. MacKay notes, he is speaking to this kind of burgeoning anger in the province, and I think that's who his comments were directed towards.
But it seemed out of character for Jason. I think that all of us felt that.
He likes a good fight, but he doesn't usually make it that personal. I want to move to the thorny issue of the Middle East, and we've all saw what happened right after the U.S. moved their embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. There were huge protests on the Gaza border. We all understand that Hamas is considered a terror organization by Canada, and they were, of course, instrumental in some of those protests. Nonetheless, Israel and Israeli forces shot and killed over 60 people. Thousands were wounded, including a Canadian doctor who was shot while he was trying to provide medical assistance. Justin Trudeau is calling for an independent inquiry. Israel has now rejected, but he did say this is an inexcusable and excessive use of force. Peter MacKay, did Justin Trudeau go too far or not far enough in his comments on the situation?
I think he went a little far. Calling for the independent inquiry is one thing, but framing it as excessive force, inexcusable excessive force, I think predetermines what any kind of a report might say. Now, there's going to be lots of other calls for similar examinations of the fact, but let's go back to basics. As you said, Hamas is a banned terrorist organization in our country and in many countries, many Western allies around the world, and they are behind this protest. Why were they bringing human shields? Why were children being brought to a zone where there was expected to be this type of response? So complex in the extreme, but highly predictable in terms of what happened here. And Hamas are very much to blame and have this blood on their hands.
Okay, well, Joyce, I've spoken to the Israeli ambassador. There are real questions about how they determined to use that kind of force. What's your view? You reported for many years from that region.
Yeah, let me quote Bernie Sanders. You know, Gaza is a humanitarian disaster. They get electricity 4 hours a day. Their hospitals are, a mess. They probably did not have what they needed to treat the people that were wounded. So I know the easy kind of American and Israeli line that this is all on Hamas, but these are people that have nothing left to lose as well. So it is a perfect storm. Gaza is a perfect storm on the best of days.
So was Justin Trudeau right to call it an excessive use of force? Was he right to call for an independent investigation?
Well, is it an excessive use of force? So let me ask perhaps the former, Foreign Affairs Minister, is opening fire with live bullets against a mostly unarmed, a demonstration, an excessive use of force? And if that's not, then perhaps define it for me, because I think it is an excessive use of force.
Craig, you weigh in and then we'll get back to Mr.
Well,
MacKay.
do you know that they were unarmed? That's my first question. Do you know that they were unarmed? And do countries
Do you know
have the
that they
right
were
to
all
defend?
armed, though? Do we know that?
Do they have the right to defend themselves against armed forces coming into their country uninvited? No country would be expected to allow that to happen.
That's not what happened, and
I
we all
have
know
not
it.
heard that anyone was shooting at the Israeli army.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard that.
This is obviously an extremely complex situation. I think our conversation shows why there should be an independent investigation into this. But I think to me, the most striking element of this situation is how different the liberal and conservative lines were on this situation in Canada. We had the conservative leader, Andrew Scheer, siding completely with the United States and putting all the blame on Hamas. We had Justin Trudeau calling for this independent investigation, using this term excessive force, siding with Theresa May and the UN on the independent investigation front. So I think
and
we really
Jagmeet Singh even condemning it wholeheartedly.
Exactly.
Condemning Israel wholeheartedly.
Right. So I think we saw quite a divergence here on the domestic front of how these two main leaders have dealt with the situation.
All right, that's all the time we've got this week. Look, that's a tragic situation, and there'll be lots more discussion about it. I want to thank Peter MacKay. Good to have you on the program, sir. And I want to thank, of course, Laura, Joyce, and Craig for joining us. And thank you for watching from all of us here at CTV News.